So, Judge Morse, welcome to our summer lunch and learn. I am so excited that you are available to be a part of this. As I mentioned to you earlier, when we were dividing up the report and talking about which lunch and learn, will we discuss what? I'm like, when we get to deep end systems, I have to talk to Judge Morse. So, thank you so much. So, my first question is, how did you become interested in a career in the law?
Well, first I will say thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to participate in this. I remember when your report came out, I think it was earlier in the year, and there's something that I immediately read through right away, and it was I think it's just such a good resource and a tool for people to kind of get a better understanding of all the factors that kind of play into these systems. So in terms of like my interest in the law, and how that came up, it was sort of a long process. So it's I think as a kid, it's something that I was always very curious about, just because I had just through things that happened with my family, had contacts with the criminal justice system. So when I was a child, I grew up in Florida. I have an older sister, Ryan, we're about a year and a half apart. So we grew up, together, very close in age. And for most of our childhood, our father was incarcerated. And so as a kid, I grew up not having him around because of that. And I think you just sort of naturally, question, or I think you really, I thought about it more trying to explain his absence to people, going to school and, you need a parent permission slip sign, things that ask you to fill in that information about mother and father's information. That father part always created a sense of kind of anxiety for me, even from, I remember being in elementary school and kind of knowing that, oh, my dad's in jail, that's bad. People will, if people know that, they'll think, that maybe I'm bad too, and just kind of having that, having that awareness, I guess, of that at a very young age. And then kind of growing up that later, my mom had a different relationship, and she had my brother. I have a younger brother who's 6 years younger than me, and his dad was actually a police officer. And I remember, his dad, John, was somebody who me and my sister loved having him around. We were close with him. But when my mom was pregnant with him, he was shot. So he actually had passed away before my brother was even born. So it was kind of having that, you have two sides of the spectrum where, I grew up with a single mom who had, these kids from these relationships, and, neither my sister or my brother had fathers around because of, in a way, this connection to the criminal justice system. So I was always very curious about that. And I think as I got older and went to college and really started learning about history, particularly the history of Black people in America, it really became evident to me how much our justice system and the decisions of our courts really have shaped the Black experience in this country, going back to, the Dred Scott decision and, the question of, are Black people citizens, and do you have the rights and are you included in these constitutional rights? I remember reading about the Loving v. Virginia case, and I have my mother's white, and my siblings, our fathers are Black, and the idea that, wow, even when my mom was born in 1960, that her relationship with our fathers was something that was taboo, or, in some places, like, people were getting prosecuted for that. And so, and then, thinking of the Brown versus Board of Education decision, and, going to school, I have a best friend, Maggie, who we met in 4th grade, and she's white. And the idea that, had this decision not come out, we might not have ever met, like we would have been at different schools. And so I think, it was always it was easy for me to see how those decisions played a role in my life, or could have made my life look a lot different. And I don't know that, if you're a person who hasn't been the kind of subject of one of those decisions where, you have a group of people, judges kind of deciding your humanity and rights, it's kind of a weird thing to experience and read about from that perspective. So it just always was evident to me that these systems are important, and they're important in a way that can affect what your day-to-day life looks like. And so it was something I wanted to be involved in and learn more about. And that's kind of what led me to law school after college.
Thank you for being so transparent and so accessible in your explanation. I think that's incredible. Yeah, incredible. So thinking back on your work in the Wisconsin Public Defender's Office, what would you say was the most rewarding part of that work?
I think my time, I was at the Public Defender's Office for 12 years. And that time really helped me, one, find a community of people that I could relate to, that had those shared experiences, shared interests, and also exposed me to communities of people that I wasn't familiar with. And so it was a very, I think just that exposure really had a big part in my just development as a person. I was lucky enough to, I've gotten to travel through my work at the Public Defender's Office. I've, traveled to Washington, D.C., and I studied with, lawyers from all over the country through different programs and different training opportunities. I've also gotten to work in different counties throughout the state. So I started out my career in the Hudson office up in northern Wisconsin before I came to Janesville. And just seeing how, I think I've worked in about maybe 7 different counties over the years. So just kind of seeing how different, how court does look different in different counties, and, different treatment options and different, just kind of different ways of doing things. Like, it's easy to see that there's not, kind of a one size fits all approach to the work that we do. And really, I think it also made me a better communicator, because I think that, that's part of my job as an advocate in court, being able to tell my client's story. But on the other hand, you also see that so much conflict between people is usually related to some sort of miscommunication or bad communication, or people that just don't know how to express their feelings in a healthy, productive way. And so I think that was something I really gained a lot of knowledge about in that time, and really kind of has made me a more open-minded, kind of understanding person, where, often in situations, it's not just an either or, it could be neither, it could be both, it could be something different. And so just really, through my interaction with people and kind of learning their stories and learning how they get to certain places, it's really easy to see how two people, depending on their past, even though there's a lot of overlap and in terms of common experiences that we have, but whether it's a childhood trauma or just economics. You can see how people can end up in very different places based on, kind of their life experience and how that affects their interactions with people, their beliefs. And I think it really just made me have more compassion.
Thank you for sharing that. And the thing that I picked up on is the exposure that you've had. I think you said you've worked in about 7 different counties across the state. And you have to be receptive to that exposure, because there's a lot of people who resist that, and then they miss out on that learning and that empathy and compassion. And like you said, becoming a better communicator and more effective for the clients that you serve. What piece of advice would you give to your colleagues that may be resistant to kind of leaning into that exposure of different cultures or different ways of thinking? What advice would you give to your colleagues that may be resistant to that?
I would say, I think sometimes the resistance, it kind of comes from it's vulnerable. You're vulnerable as a person being in a new environment, as anybody, just the fact that, most people are like more comfortable at home in their familiar surroundings. And so I think sometimes people avoid that exposure because it is new, it is different. And it does kind of bring up those feelings of, I'm vulnerable, I don't know what to do, or, this is not a situation where I know I have the tools to navigate through. And so I think just, don't be afraid to mess up. That was something I learned when I started working in the Hudson office. There's the county, one of the counties I worked in, this common, in this state, like there's a pretty significant Indigenous population. And so, working with clients who lived on reservations, that was a foreign concept to me, not something I knew about. And so, just trying to learn and in a way where I know if I make a mistake or, mess up, that like that's part of the process. And, not having the, not necessarily not being mindful of how your actions affect others, but, being willing to, kind of put yourself out there in a way where it may seem scary and it may seem vulnerable, but at the end of it, it is a very rewarding experience. So I would just say, don't be afraid of that vulnerability. I think that's where the growth happens. Sometimes it's not always pretty. If you think, you're a caterpillar and you're turning into a butterfly, there's probably a reason that there's a cocoon over that while, all the shifting is happening, because it looks gross and nobody wants to see, something turning into goo. So, but sometimes we have to do that in the open and be brave enough to do that in the open, and have, give other people that grace and support when they're at least trying to learn something new.
I like the metaphor. There's probably a reason for that cocoon. You are probably right. And public transformation is not always pretty, and it's not always clean and all of that good stuff, but hopefully it's always worth it. Great advice. Excellent. How was your work with the Galt Center and being selected as an ambassador for racial justice shaped your work as a judge?
I can't, I really can't say enough good things about the Galt Center. The team of people that work at that center and the advocacy they do, and the amount of resources that they freely make available to people, I think is it's just amazing. It's just wonderful to see people passionately working towards improving a system, not because they're it's for profit or anything like that, like that. It's really just people that really care about children. And I mean, the staff has just been so inspiring and supportive of me. I've gotten to meet and connect with attorneys all over this country that are on the ground working with kids. And it's just been phenomenal. I think sometimes it can be easy to get sort of, I don't know if jaded is the right word, but sometimes you continue to see things that you don't think are fair, or you know that there are disproportionate outcomes for kids, and that sometimes we don't always have all the tools that we wish we had, to have the impact that we want to have and create the change that we want to see. And so sometimes that road can be discouraging. There can be a lot of losses and tough cases, and to have a community of people that kind of know what you're going through and support you and give you new ideas is really just something that I've really valued, and was just such a great resource for me. I would say my mentor, Chris Henning, who's the professor at Georgetown, in her clinic, works with as part of the Galt Center and a lot of their programming. And she wrote the book that's up there, The Rage of Innocence. And she's just such a phenomenal speaker and communicator, and just really explains complicated things in a way that's easily accessible and relatable. And so, she's someone who definitely taught me that sometimes it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And even, realizing in situations where I might not be the best messenger for what information I'm trying to deliver. And so, having that humility, to step aside in cases where to say, it doesn't have to come from me, it can come from anybody. Anybody can get involved, and it's just really, it's been really inspiring. And it's also nice to connect with attorneys who, had similar childhood experiences as I did, and so, that kind of gives you that sense of community, because sometimes, I think people have the impression that, lawyers are, kind of, I think when I went to law school, there you had kind of a group of people who were often the first person in their family to go to college, first person to go to law school, but then you had a lot of people who, whose parents were lawyers, who went to that school, and kind of had that legacy, where you can kind of feel like you maybe, are starting behind, or you don't know as much, or don't have the advantage of, kind of understanding the law school systems and stuff. But yeah, it's nice to see people from all different backgrounds, all different life experiences that, are connected through the work that we do. So that's just been really cool.
No, what you were describing at the Galt Center just seems like such a beautiful community, and having like this tribe that's there to absorb some of those frustrations and those losses that you describe, but also to like amplify in the celebration when you do have wins.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds really beautiful. And I'm really glad that you're connected to a body like that. That's awesome. So how can community members, schools, local organizations advocate for juvenile justice practices that are equitable? What can we do?
I think that it's, I think like what I want to tell people is that, everybody can play a part. It doesn't, like the steps you take or the things that you do doesn't, it doesn't have to be some huge thing. You know, it could be taking time to have a conversation with somebody, or I was talking the other day about to someone about the, experience I had as a child in school, where I was telling you earlier about how I had, this anxiety about, some of the forms and, the standardized tests. And usually it wasn't the actual content of the test that was giving me the anxiety. It was, how do I fill out the demographic part? Like when it would ask you, like usually the, your options were, Black, white, Hispanic, other. And so as a, biracial child, and at the time, as I got a little older, I was living in a predominantly white community, and I was the only person of color in my class. And so, for all the other kids in the class, they just mark white and go about their business. And I'm sitting there struggling, like, do I pick, well, my mom's white, should I pick white? Should I pick Black? Am I other? Like, do I want to be other? Does that sound bad? And like and really just nobody not having the tools to really navigate that as a fourth grader, to, have the teacher, and ask the teacher, well, what should I put, and they're just like, well, just put other, and it was just kind of an afterthought. But, even a little bit of, taking the time to kind of walk me through that and explain why, other's not bad, like, because it's easy to get that impression. I think, especially when you're a child, that, there's something different about you, that you're not normal, or, everybody, I think all kids just want to, fit in. And so, now, because I've had that experience, when people tell me, like, use the right pronouns, like these little things matter. I can see that, I can totally see how, that can make a difference. And so, I would just encourage people, even if it's something little, like, it can make a big difference to a child, especially to a child, in terms of how they view themselves in the world. So I think that's really something we really all need to be mindful and really show a lot of compassion about, because it's so much easier to build resilient children than fix broken adults. That's something that's been very evident to me in my work, that, in representing hundreds of clients over the years, so many of them have common trauma, that they experience as children. And so I think even the lessons we've learned over the pandemic, in terms of, we saw kids that were normally, good kids, good grades, did well, were involved in extracurriculars, really struggle with that transition to online school and not being, being removed from their peer group and isolated. So we know that, even, kids that have, the, the resources, the parental support, even under those situations, a lot of kids struggled in that environment. And so, it always made me think about the, children that face it, like once a kid is expelled from school, and the options for education beyond that, a lot of it is that online learning that we know now a lot of kids struggle with. And so, are we taking kids and putting them in situations where we know really they're, that we're not equipping you with all the tools that you need to really be successful. And so just making sure that we, kids, even if you have an issue in school, whatever the situation is, still giving them a real opportunity to develop those skills that they need as an adult. When I was a kid in high school, I played basketball, played volleyball, and so much of what I learned about working as a team, communicating with people, really understanding how my actions affect others, because you could see that immediate impact, on your team if I'm not in the position I'm supposed to be in when, a certain play is called. So the, doing, and so that could mean, just participating in an after school program, playing ball with kids outside. Like, it can be anything you can do to create those opportunities for children to develop those communication skills, develop empathy. I think that's something that we can all be a part of. I think that old saying, it takes a village to raise a child is, it's not just cliche, like I think that's a real thing. And I think that we've seen that in the course of the pandemic when, people tended to be more isolated in the struggles that went along with that.
Judge Morse, that is not the answer that I was expecting, but I so appreciate it. I thought, like advocate for policy changes and show up in the court and work with CASA and other organizations like this. And you were like, no, this is something everyone can do. And it starts with building connections and giving children opportunities to develop that empathy and connection and communication. And absolutely, I see your point. It was not what I was expecting, and that is okay. No, I think that is advice that, again, all of us, you don't have to have completed a certain program or certification or degree or have this experience. It's like, no, build connections with our kids and invest in them. All right, perfect. So my final question is, who inspires you?
I would say I'm inspired by so many people all the time. I'm always inspired when I'm inspired a lot by the resiliency of kids, and the kids that I've worked with over the years that have really gone through some things, and they keep going, they keep trying. That is inspiring to me. I think that Chris Henning, my mentor through the Galt Center, is really inspiring to me in a way, is that she's been doing this for years, way before there was a book. She was it's somebody who saw a problem or, had an experience where you think that's not quite right, or I'm not comfortable with that, how that went, or I think we could do better, and it kind of, I think a lot of people have those moments where, you have that thought, but it kind of just passes and you think, oh, well, it's not, somebody else will deal with it, or it's not really my business, or, you kind of just let it go. But, she's a person who, through those experiences, and I think that's, how she writes her book is, here's what I've learned from these cases that I've been involved in, where I've seen something, go wrong, or seen where things could have gone better, and really kind of methodically, developing a program where, it's like, okay, I'm going to take some action, I'm going to take that action step. And, something that started out small, has developed into this, huge community of advocates that are connected all across the country, so I think, no idea is too small. And really it's the people that, I tell, often, it's the teachers, it's the counselors, it's the diversion workers, the people that really do those are the people that do the hard work, the heavy lifting. I'm in court and I might say this or that, but, it's really those people that are, that show up for kids over and over again, that really make me think, this is the least I can do, So, just a lot of people in the community, really.
Well, that was a beautiful and humble response. I just want to say that you inspire us. I'm so proud of you and so incredibly grateful for the work that you do and showing up fully yourself with all of your experiences, and leaning into being vulnerable and learning from others and allowing that to shape who you are and the work that you do. And I'm convinced I'm going to go ahead and pick up a copy of The Rage of Innocence. So I will definitely check that out. But those are the questions that I wanted to ask you. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is important to share? Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
Um, I would just say if you're, if you're watching this recording and you're listening to this, like, you know, you deserve a round of applause because you're already showing up doing just if you attended this lunch and learn, like, I just think that's awesome. And, so thank you, for doing this and making this resource available. I think it all helps. And I think I'm excited that there are so many people in this community that care about these issues. And so that's something that really motivates me. And so, like I said, that's the starting, that's where it all starts, is people just showing up. So I would just encourage everybody to continue to do that. And, again, not to be afraid of being vulnerable in these situations, because that is where the magic happens.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have this conversation included in our summer lunch and learn, and it has been a pleasure spending a little bit of time with you.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.